Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we're following our fictional Elvis fan Joyce in 1977 as she tries to solve the mystery of August 16th, 1977. Hi, Terry. Thanks so much for coming. I always appreciate having you here. So, if you've been following the last several episodes, you know that Joyce and her friends have been going through a lot of newspaper articles from the morning of the 17th, which are basically telling us what happened on the 16th. And they started watching a lot of news reports. So we saw yesterday Chet Atkins say something very nice about Elvis. That was the day before. We saw J.D. Sumner yesterday, as well as Ed Enoch from the Stamps Quartet. And we saw some footage directly from Graceland about the amount of people that have gathered in front of Graceland that are trying to get in to see the body. We heard that there were 70,000 people there, and a third of them made it through. So somewhere around 23,000 people, according to the news, tramped through the front room of Graceland in a single afternoon in about 2 hours and 45 minutes, less than 3 hours. It's pretty amazing, right? We also saw that the amount of flowers that are coming in is overwhelming. They've now stopped receiving them at Graceland. They're being sent to the cemetery, and we'll see that tomorrow when that funeral actually happens. They'll be giving away those flowers to the fans to try to get them out of the cemetery because there's just too many for any one place to handle. And of course, Memphis sold out of flowers, and all the surrounding area, like the entire flower industry, tried to feed this need to get flowers to Elvis in Memphis for this time. So today we're going to get right into what I've promised for a while, which was supposed to happen several episodes ago, but we've just had so much good information to look at that it just took me a lot longer to get through it all than I anticipated. But today we are going to see Sonny West and Dave Hebler. They're going to give a press conference. This conference happened on the 17th at the end of the day, in like the 6-7 o'clock time period, the main news period. Hi, Emma. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, thank you so much for posting a shout out and recommending my channel and Terry's. And everybody be sure to check out Elvis History and Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. They both got channels. You should be able to find them, I believe, just by typing in the names of the channels on YouTube and looking around a little bit. But they both have new videos coming out every day. So I would definitely encourage you to go over and take a look. We're going to start with this picture that I actually have up on the screen today. Well, hello, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. I definitely appreciate having you here. In the picture that we have up, you can see Sonny West, you can see Dave Hebler, you can see Red West, and you can see Elvis. And this picture is from July 9th, 1975 in Terre Haute, Indiana. So it really wasn't that long before, just a little over 2 years before, when they had all been friends. And these three were in this picture protecting Elvis Presley. They were what stood between Elvis and a bullet, or a guy running up and beating him with a stick, or whatever might happen. They were there to protect him. In this very picture, Dave and Sonny are in the front, leading the way to probably a car for Elvis to get into to be taken somewhere. And if you look in Dave's hand, you can see that he's carrying a case. And you can also see that Red is carrying a case. Now, I believe that the case Dave is carrying is the black box. The one that they talk about, that Elvis always had with him, that had some items, personal items in it, like his wallet and some cash. Always had a Bible in there. And if you've seen Riley on Oprah, she had this black box and she opened it and she showed the Bible that was in it and some of the other items. I believe he also carried some makeup in here, and because I believe it's really a makeup case. I'm not positive about that, but I believe that's why he started carrying it. Similar to something like Lon Chaney Jr. would actually carry it around to do their Man of 1,000 Faces. But he, of course, was keeping a lot of personal items in there, kind of like a woman's purse, but much bigger and heavier. And he, of course, employed somebody to carry it. Now, I don't know what Red's carrying. Maybe it's a second black box. I didn't know he had more than one. But maybe he had a lot of stuff he liked to carry around and more than one guy. Now, this is a small piece of a larger picture. And in the larger picture, there's another picture that shows a larger angle. And you can see more of the guys, and they are all carrying some kind of case. So I just found that interesting. Hello, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. I definitely appreciate having you here. All right, so let's get right in because we're always running out of time so that we can make sure to see what Sonny and Red have to say. Get this set up for us. And here we go.
I think he was a victim of himself and the image and the legend.
Do you regret having written the book, and what impact do you think his death is going to have on it?
I don't have regrets for writing the book. I have a lot of sorrowful feelings about the timing, because what's happening now, the rumors that are going about, is that there are some rumors around trying to portray us as bloodsuckers who wrote this book to capitalize on the death of Elvis Presley. And they never seem to realize that the book was written a year ago, when he was alive.
David Sonny.
So Dave's saying that the book was written a year ago, which would have been the time that they put in the 300 hours that we saw in a previous article where they sat with Steve Dunleavy and they spewed whatever they spewed for 300 hours. Now, they also told a lot of great stories. And we know that the size of the book alone indicates that there aren't anywhere close to 300 hours worth of stories in this book. And even with all the perhaps bad things that they said, the things that Steve was able to sensationalize, the book is still very thin. And a lot of it is sweet stories. So what they did have to say wasn't a whole lot. But they used every bit of that, but they left out a bunch of other stuff. Now, I don't think Dave had anything to do with that. Red didn't have anything to do with that. Sonny didn't have anything to do with that. That was Steve. Steve Dunleavy, the guy who wrote the book. They trusted him far too much. And I'm not saying that giving the interviews in the first place was right, but I don't believe they expected what happened to happen. I do believe that they expected him to be angry, and we're going to see that as we go on into these interviews and another newspaper article that I've got to go over. But so what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not saying that Dave or Sonny or Red were bad people. I do believe they made a lot of terrible, bad decisions here. I believe they made a lot of decisions that hurt a friend, and decisions that that same friend would not have made towards them. I do believe that friend took some actions that hurt them, and they took as hurtful. I don't know whether he could have handled that better, but I think it's one of the dangers when you employ your friends, and we see that here, that business and pleasure or friends don't always mix, but all of Elvis's business was friends. You know, almost everybody that he did business with was a personal friend of his. Anybody who wasn't was mostly at arm's length and handled through the colonel or somebody else. So this is a path that Elvis chose. And when he was 22 to 25, no one could have foreseen what was going to happen here, where they would have this kind of breakdown. And it's also one of the reasons I had the picture up, was to show that there was a point in time where Elvis trusted these three completely with his life. And I think they trusted him completely at that moment. And something happened between that moment and the moment that they're terminated in 1976. And so a lot of the controversy circles around what they did with the book and the publication stuff. But the truth is whatever happened that we don't know that caused this split in the first place. And it's probably in that 300 hours, and it's not in the book. But let's go back and listen to what Dave has to say.
At the spur of the moment, many times before, Elvis used to go up and just buy gifts for people, automobiles and everything else. Why did he do that?
He loved to give.
Did the drugs have anything to do with that?
I don't think so. I think it was just the spirit. He wanted to see the person's face when he gave it to him. I mean, it was he was insistent upon that. He liked to see, and he would be with them and share with them, boy, for that time. And then the next day, he didn't want you to mention it, that, you know, it was gone and past, and that moment was it, and he gave it to you, and he wanted you to just accept it in that sense, that he enjoyed giving it to you, and he didn't want you to carry on about it over a period of time. Excuse me. And he loved to give. We went with him one time to a black lady in Memphis that he had read about in the paper that was crippled. And he read about it, just an article in there, no special appeal thing. And he went and bought the most expensive wheelchair, electric wheelchair, and took it over to her and gave her some money and stuff. I mean, this is the way it was.
So here we see Sonny, even though he's published this book which attacks Elvis and says he died of a drug overdose, and he's actually saying that in interviews. When the reporter asked, did Elvis's giving have anything to do with the drugs, insinuating that Elvis was out of his mind and only someone that's out of their mind would give away this much money, Sonny does immediately jump to his defense and say, no, he was a very generous person. Had nothing to do with the drugs. Whether he took any drugs or not, he would have been an incredibly generous person, always was. So that's at least in Sonny's favor. I also think that Sonny looks better right here than he ever did in his life, before or after. Something about the way he got his hair, and he's borrowing Elvis's sunglasses indoors look, and then he's got the beard thing going on. But very 70s. Much more 70s, I think, than Dave looks. So I just find that interesting too. And I definitely appreciate that you guys like the television. I am trying to show what an entire 1977 experience. So this is a television that would have been available in 1970. It's a 1977 model. You would actually had to have been a little bit wealthy maybe to afford this, or if not wealthy, your old TV has gone out and you've invested into a new one. Because most people at this time, I believe, were a one television household. That's probably something that's almost impossible for anybody that was born after the turn of the century to actually comprehend, that there was only one TV, and it wasn't because everybody had a phone and could get their TV on the phone. The phones were on the wall or connected to the wall, and they were big and heavy, and you didn't really carry them around. You might have, well, not 77. Several years later, you get to cordless phones. They're still big and heavy, but you're not watching any TV on them, and you're certainly not texting with anybody at this point in time. So most people had one television. It might have been this size. This is, I believe, I think this was like a 19-inch, a 17 or a 19-inch television. Which at the time they thought was enormous, but which we would think of today as tiny and small and almost unwatchable, unless it was right in your face like a phone. So it's just another interesting way to look at the technology and of the time period and how that differs from today. And Emma's saying that Sonny does look great here, and he does suit the 70s. And that you're a no television. Emma's a no television household until she finds that 1950s working one. Yeah, I wouldn't even have a television anymore if other people in the household didn't need one, because I do all my stuff on computers and phones now. So it's amazing how much we have changed in our media consumption. Let's go ahead and listen to what else Sonny has to say.
What feedback had you ever gotten from Elvis on the book? Did you get any of that?
No.
No.
He said he wasn't worried about it.
What did he mean, do you think?
He just meant that he wasn't. He knew, man, that we loved him. He knew that we weren't going to chop him up or try to axe him or anything. He knew. He knows now that. I'm telling you.
What was the purpose of...
So Sonny wants us to believe that Elvis knew that the book was coming out and he didn't mind, even though we've already heard and we've seen them with the picture where they're holding up that Star magazine that says Elvis was fighting the publication. So Elvis was either fighting the publication or he didn't mind. It's got to be one or the other, right? It can't be both. And that they wouldn't make him... Somebody's basically saying they wouldn't make him... they wouldn't humiliate him in public, is what he's saying. But we know that that's not true, based on what he's already said and the quotes that have come out from the book. And they're all the worst quotes. It's, they had very little in the book to start with, and they pared that down slightly to get into these press junkets. But they basically revealed everything they were gonna... You were basically wasting your money by the time you bought the book, unless you wanted to read the sweet stories, which they didn't say a thing about. Hi, Carolyn. Thanks so much for coming. Even though you're actually going to watch later, but that's great. I really appreciate that you guys take the time out to watch whenever you do. And I really appreciate every comment, every like, every subscription, every time you share with somebody. Yesterday we had Joe from his channel come over here and tell us that we were doing a great job over here. So that really meant a lot to me, that we're starting to get out there, and people who really care about Elvis are starting to notice that, we're making a difference over here, trying to get out some truth and some source material and, cut it right down to where we can see what happened for ourselves and make our own decisions. So let's see what Sonny still has to say.
Following this press conference, I'd like you to spell it out.
To counteract what we think people have gone around without reading the book, just going out and hearing from someone on a certain individual on different shows about their reaction to the book, and they haven't read the book, and then some of the people that are talking haven't read the book, and we think that I think it deserves a fair thing for us to be able to say our side and how much we did love the guy and how much admiration we had for him.
So now Sonny's saying that apparently there are people out there that are giving the book a bad review. Now, we're doing a fairly thorough look at all the newspapers here, and I don't think we've seen a poor review of this book come out yet. Now, we didn't go back to when the book was actually published. Maybe there were some from then. So I don't know exactly what he's referring to, but the articles that we have seen where somebody is being interviewed is either him or Steve Dunleavy or Ronna Barrett, who was the gossip columnist that interviewed them and then, helped them push the book, or Bob Green, the guy from just Chicago Sun-Times, who was interviewing Sonny and got real lucky that was the day Elvis passed away, and suddenly his name is everywhere in America because Sonny's article is published everywhere. And Sonny certainly wasn't saying bad things about the book. He was saying bad things about Elvis and trying to push the sales of those books. And now he's saying that everybody should read the book and just give it a fair chance, while he's already gone on into other interviews, and I don't think he's given Elvis a fair chance in those interviews. But again, that's my opinion. You guys all get to have your own opinion. Everybody's opinion here is welcome. Feel free to put it in the comments as we chat, or feel free to put it in the comments when the video drops. Either way, I read all the comments and I try to respond to everyone. And I really do appreciate seeing everyone's opinions because I don't know everything. These are just my opinions from watching the source material. And sometimes you guys say things and it completely changes my mind. And just like each of you, I'm learning things as we go through this. So let's go back to Sonny.
Wrote this book, it was out of bitterness and hurt to start with. I tell you, when we were given 3 days notice by his father and a week's pay, after 16 years, 20 years, 2.5, 3 years with Dave, we all had families, and he wouldn't talk to us himself. He flew out of town, and he had his father do it.
So I'm hearing 3 weeks notice, which I think maybe a lot of us thought 2 weeks. So he got 3 weeks of pay. And so 16 years, maybe 3 weeks of pay isn't very much, but it's not like you just kicked them out on their ear. Thank you so much for coming, Pat. I really appreciate you being here. And Pat's saying that if Sonny loved Elvis and Dave loved Elvis, they wouldn't be trashing Elvis. I think, there's a lot of good points there. I don't know that we could say that they didn't love him or that he didn't love them. I think that we've all hurt people that we love. And it's a terrible thing that we as humans do. So I know that these guys suffered for the rest of their lives for it. And I know that what we're watching here is what I believe is the worst behavior of their lives. So I'm not trying to protect them from anything that is their due. But I am trying to understand everybody that was there and what happened. What we're seeing here is a reaction to something, not the firing. He's angry about the firing, but he knew the firing was coming. They make it clear that they knew this was coming. So there had been some, and some people will say, well, it was this thing where they had hurt this one individual who had tried to come up to Elvis. Oh, well, maybe, but I don't think it's that. It's something much more personal that we don't know. And Emma's saying that she believes the same as Pat and doesn't understand why humiliating him in this way would help him. Well, it definitely wouldn't. Humiliating him is not going to help him. Humiliating him was their way to get back at him because he had cut them out of his life. And it's just like when somebody tries to get back at their ex when they have a terrible romantic breakup. And we see it all the time on the news. And there's laws about stalkers and all that stuff now because people do this. This is a way that people react to their anger and humiliation when they are cast aside. And that's the way that these three guys saw it, even though they might have been asking for it by whatever it is that happened between them and Elvis. And Pat says that it's her opinion it was revenge upon being fired. And like I just was saying, you're absolutely right, Pat. I believe there's a lot of revenge here. Now, I think they might have justified it to themselves and might have actually believed that they were trying to help Elvis Presley because as humans, we are very complicated individuals and we have to lie to ourselves to get ourselves to do some of the worst things that we do. Although sometimes we just do them. So maybe, I can't say what was going through their head. I'm just trying to put out possibilities here. And Terry is saying that part of this clip is on the documentary movie This Is Elvis. And thank you, Terry. And that's a movie that every Elvis fan should definitely see. And Pat's saying that Sonny just said it was bitterness. Yep, he sure did. He sure did. And Emma's agreeing with me. And thank you, Emma. I love to see everybody's opinions. And Terry's saying that he's going to watch the movie tomorrow. And Pat's asking, so why put that book out if they knew it was coming? Well, like Dave said, it was already done a year ago. They collected their money a year ago. And I'm going to, if we make it there, I'm hoping to make it there within this episode. But there's a lot to this clip. So I don't know if we're going to make it there. But I am going to eventually reveal what they got paid. And you're going to be shocked. I'm not going to tell you which way you're going to be shocked, but you will be shocked. And Emma's saying that the movie's good. So thanks so much for interacting in the comments, guys. It really keeps the stream alive. And let's get back and see what else these two guys got to say.
Why did he terminate you?
At the time, no, at the time, it was told us by his father that there was a cutback on expenses, which I knew wasn't true. And he called me and he said, so we're going to have to let a few people go. And I said, and I'm one of the people? And he said, yeah. He said, but there's going to be others. And I
So the guy asked Sonny, why were you fired? And then Sonny says this thing about, well, what his father told me. Well, what difference does it make what Vernon told you? Sonny knows why he got fired. And this is a thing, as an HR guy, a guy who did HR for a long time, I never brought anybody into the room to terminate them that didn't know exactly why they were getting terminated. Now, some of them said things like this. Well, I don't understand. Why would I get terminated? But they all knew. If you've been late 200 times, and this was the 201st, and we'd already written you up 5 times, yeah, you know why you're getting terminated. If you had done something egregious, you know that you did it. Sonny and Dave and Red, this was not something out of the blue. We can see that in some other articles that I have to show you. This was not a surprise to them. They knew it was coming. The actual day was a surprise, and that's true in all terminations. No one ever knows exactly when HR, or in this case, Vernon and Elvis, are going to pull the trigger. But Sonny knows why he got terminated, but he instead twisted around on Vernon and says, well, he gave us this excuse that it was for this money. But Sonny says he knows it wasn't for the money. So Sonny does. He's also revealing to us that he does know why it's for, but he still doesn't tell us why it's for. And Pat's saying it was Vernon who fired them, not Elvis. And tell me if I'm wrong, Vernon didn't really like them. You know, I don't know whether Vernon liked him or not. They've been around, like Sonny saying, 16 years. Now, Dave hadn't been around that long. But Vernon, I think, did like professional security around Elvis. And even though Sonny was not professional in the sense he'd been trained to be security, he had been there 16 years. And he had picked up quite a bit of knowledge. Dave was a professional karate guy who could kill a man with his bare hands. He was a very useful man to have around to protect you. There were others like Sam Thompson and Dick Grobe, and together they made a fairly decent protective team. Vernon knew Red would run into a bullet for Elvis. So, you know, I don't think Vernon especially liked Red, but they got along. They'd known each other for a very long time. And when they were all out on the road together, and they were all participating in some behaviors together that were probably anti-family. You know, they all had their share of mistresses, and they were all doing things with, now, not Vernon specifically with drugs, but they were all participating in certain behaviors. And it's impossible to believe Vernon wasn't aware of some of those behaviors. And Vernon was definitely participating in the womanizing. So were they friends? I think that they were definitely work friends. You know, the kind, not the kind you would bring home and necessarily bring to dinner, but they were work friends, and they ended up at dinner with Vernon a lot. And so I believe this did hurt Vernon to terminate these guys. And I think whatever they did, he saw as so egregious that you know, Elvis was first. Elvis was number one. Vernon's loyalties were always with Elvis. They were never going to be with anyone else. So the fact that you could have done this after 16 years, whatever it was, that's what Vernon was responding to, in my opinion. Now, you guys might have other opinions, and you can feel free to put them out there. And then Terry saying, the website Daily Motion has nearly every movie on there. That's good knowledge, Terry, so people can get out there and see them. Emma's saying, that's what I've always thought, that Vernon was never a fan of them. And that he would have got rid of them years ago if he could. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Elvis definitely needed protection. He definitely needed people you could vent to. Vernon didn't want to be the man that Elvis vented to all the time. Because Elvis had a lot of venting. So he needed these people, and he did see that some of them, I believe, were taking advantage of Elvis, and he did warn him about things like that. And I believe that they had issues about it, because there is a story that one time Vernon told Elvis, and I believe Vernon tells this story shortly after Elvis passes away. We'll probably see it show up. I think it's in the Good Housekeeping article. But he tells Elvis that he can see that people around him are using him for their desires, using him for their wants, to fulfill their wants. And Elvis says, when you look at them, you see what they want. When I look at them, I see what they need. And so he was indicating that he provided for their needs, not necessarily for their wants. That some of the things they wanted, they did need. You know, that people need their dreams fulfilled. But he's also stating that he wasn't giving them everything. He saw very clearly that they wanted more than he was going to give them, because that wasn't going to be good for them. And he was fulfilling for the needs of themselves and their family. And I did read a story just yesterday about his cousin Harold, who worked as a gate guard. And it's in Harold's book. And of course, I'm so bad with names, so I hope I got that Harold name right. But it was his cousin, who was Retha's son, who was Gladys's sister. And Gladys's sister, when Elvis was still living in Tupelo, probably around 8 or 9 years old, I can't remember the exact date, might have been as young as 6. Retha had an accident with like a kerosene lamp or something that was flammable like that. And the fuel got everywhere and it caught her on fire. And she died 14 hours later of terrible burns. And so her son was left basically without a father, because she had divorced his father years earlier, married another man. That man got remarried. And Harold would live with different family members, including Gladys and Elvis, for periods. And then before Elvis ever hired him to be a gate guard, Elvis, he would come and see Elvis. And Harold was kind of I don't want to say he was simple, okay, but he saw the world through more like a child's eyes than an adult's. Not that he wasn't an adult or that he didn't handle his adult responsibilities, but he was always of a younger mindset, and that's why he was able to get along with Elvis so well when they were children. But he was a few years older than Elvis. But he would come to Graceland, and he would ask Elvis for money. And he tells 2 or 3 stories right in a row where he's come and asked for money. But on one of them, Harold had a wife, and he had children, and he needed the money for his family. And so he was there talking to Gladys one day, and he told her about his financial issues. And she went to see Elvis. Elvis came downstairs, and she said, "Son, Harold he's in need. And it would be really nice if you could give him some money." And Elvis says, "Mama, I already know he needs. I saw him when he came in, and I could see that he was in need. So I've already got the money here, and I'm going to give it to him before he leaves." So Elvis was always thinking about these people and his family and the ones that he took care of, and I've tried to emphasize that responsibility that he felt. And I think another way to look at it is when he was young and he had just hit his fame, his regional fame, he started to bring in real money. Not the kind of money he would eventually bring in, but enough to pay the bills. So he started to send money back from the road, and he would call his father and mother, and he would refer to them as his babies, because basically their roles had flipped. They had gone from the providers to a period of kind of equality while he was 18 and moving into this new career. And now he's making more money and he's paying all the bills, and he's the provider, and they are now his babies. But he doesn't stop there. He brings in his grandma. And then he brings in other family members, and he stretches out his wings to cover everyone in his family and then a whole bunch of friends. And although he never uses the term babies for them, that's the way he's thinking, that he's taking care of all these people. And it was very important to him, and it's deeply part of his psychological makeup. And just to get back into the comments, Pat's saying that Vernon didn't like any of them, and I think it's probably true that he definitely wasn't inviting them to dinner on his own. You know, he wasn't spending time voluntarily with them. And Terry's saying, I think Vernon knew they were taking Elvis for a ride. Now, I think that in 74, 75, 76, things really started to go south, that they had incredible spending habits by that point. I think their own drug habits were out of control. I think that they had gone so long without thinking of limits that they didn't have any. Colleen, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate seeing you here. Good that you finally made it to alive. Really happy to have you. Just taking a look through the rest of these comments here. And he talks about in the Rose Clayton Elvis by Those Who Knew Him book, Matt. I think you're talking about Harold. So yeah. So I mean, I just thought that was a great story about how Elvis, he really cared about all the members of his family, even the ones that you don't hear that much about. And then Terry's saying that dialogue I'm referring to about he sees what they not what they want, but what they need, that's he says it to Scylla in the Kurt Russell movie. That's interesting, Terry. I'm positive that that's a quote from Vernon in around this time period, and I think it's in that article that I mentioned. Okay. I think I caught up with all the comments. Emma's saying he would address telegrams to his parents addressed to his babies. Yes. And so I think that was a mindset that he had about everyone that he took care of, even if he didn't call them by that pet name. And then Emma's talking about the cost of these books, and these books are insane. The prices on Elvis books right now are insane. They're total insanity. The books that I paid $7 or $8 for less than 10 years ago are in the hundreds now. And Terry just wants to let everyone know there's other channels called Terry's Channel. It just reached 500 subscribers. And Elvis History has 80. And let's get back and finish out this interview with these guys.
Asked him, would you tell me who? And he said, no, I'd rather tell him personally. It turned out to be Dave and Red. And since then, there have been rumors that got back to us that it was because of the lawsuits that were against him. One for me, where I had hit a guy up in Tahoe that was trying to break in a locked exit door and turn out all our utilities, and had drawn back on Elvis's stepbrother. When I got to the hallway, he was drawn back, and I hit him, and that was only his own time. Body chops, and Elvis had never touched him. So that was going nowhere. But it was a hassle. He had to go give his deposition. He had to go up to the hotel there to Tahoe and give a deposition. And the man put his hand out to this guy, Ashley, that was hurt when we let go.
What about when you wrote the book?
Well,
so the most important part to get out of what Sonny just said there is the very beginning part where he says rumors got back to us. So Sonny's telling you right there that this is not the reason we got fired. These are rumors about what we got fired, but they're rumors that go with our narrative, so we're going to go ahead and mention them. But like I'm telling you, Sonny knows why he got fired. He doesn't need a rumor to tell him why he got fired. So he's just throwing out another red herring here that some people believe it's because of this. But he's the one person in the world that doesn't need to tell us what some people believe. He only needs to tell us what the truth is.
if you read the book, I don't think you'll see bitterness.
Well, I don't have time to.
He says, I don't think you'll see bitterness in the book. This guy's telling him that he doesn't have time to read the book, which is just hilarious. That's your media for you. They're going to report on stuff, but they're not actually going to take the time to look over it or verify that it's correct in any way. Very telling statement by the media. But for him to say that there's no bitterness in the book, I mean, we see the bitterness in the interviews. So how could it not be in the book? But let's get back to it.
Read the book before I write a story. We are the daily paper thinkers. I haven't got time to sit down and read the book. I've got to hear what you have to say.
I don't have time to read the book. That is just hilarious. And Sonny's shocked because this is what happens when you publish things. Like, as I've learned from this channel, people don't watch everything you put out. And even if they do, they got other things going on. They're not necessarily paying a lot of attention to what you said. Turns out that the things that you put out here aren't as important to other people as you may think they are. And Sonny believed that, hey, we published this book, the whole world has suddenly read this book and they know. But there's only 400,000 copies out here. So no, not everybody's read the book. Very few people have even seen your interviews because people are interested in Elvis. They're not really interested in what Sonny has to say, but they are in this moment because it connects to this death of Elvis. And they're trying to understand what happened to Elvis. So people are listening to him at this moment. This is what he thought would happen all along, but it didn't really. And so for the last year, these three guys have kind of been spinning their heels waiting for what they believed would be this moment, and now it's been overshadowed by Elvis's death, and they've been pushed into the limelight that they wanted, but it's nothing like what they thought it would be and nothing like what they really wanted.
Well, that's unfortunate because the problem is that, you know, everything is inexorably tied into the book. And, you know, I can't apologize for your lack of time not being able to read the book.
Well, your author, Dunleavy, seems to be prompting he's read the whole book, I assume, since he wrote it. He keeps...
And this journalist isn't even sure if Steve Dunleavy's read the book, even though he wrote it, which that just shows you what one journalist thinks about another, and that these guys that are doing the interview, they believe themselves to be a step ahead of they're one step up the ladder from Steve Dunleavy. Dunleavy's a muckraker. He works for the tabloids. They believe they're better than him. But like they've just told us, they didn't read this book. So they're willing to report on something that they had no idea about and doesn't bother them in any way. So I don't see personally any difference between them and Steve Dunleavy. But this reporter is making it clear that he does.
Talking about drugs all the time.
Well, he's sensationalism. I mean, he writes for the Star. As you know, it's on the same thing as the Inquirer, the sensationalism type thing. He's writing for the New York Post, too. He's running a series of articles in there. And when we met him, he wasn't like that when we were with him last year. I mean, he was interested. He broke down with us during the interviews when he...
So now we got Sonny saying that Steve, well, sure, he wrote for a tabloid when we met him, but he wasn't like a muckraker like he is now. Like, we didn't have any idea it was going to be like that. So it's also funny that Sonny just flips on Steve immediately during this interview, yet Steve's out there pushing this book hard. Now, it's not clear to me that Sonny or Dave or Red's getting a cut of the book. From the deal that we're going to see, it was a one-time payment. And there's no royalties on it. There may be, and they're just not mentioned. But if they are, based on the payment, I don't think they can be much. So, Steve, though, Steve's deaf. Well, this article also indicates Steve's not making anything from the book. But that just doesn't really jive with the amount of press that these guys are doing, right? Unless they're getting paid by the day or something and they're just willing to take the day payment. So there's a lot of business stuff behind the scenes that doesn't really make sense with what they say and what gets printed. Because it would seem like they would be making money off this. And yet Sonny has flipped on Steve. It says, he's not the guy that I thought he was.
One of us get moved when we recall an instance of what this man had done. And I couldn't believe that was the same guy up there. I could not believe.
Have you tried to talk to him? What would you tell him if you could talk to him right now?
I would tell him, Steve, well, I can't say what I'd tell him.
Tell us
no, it would be curse words. I mean, I would call him a name, and I said, what are you doing, man? Who are you? You were someone we told a story to, and you're going up there and blasting into him like that and saying the whole thing's about drugs. It's not. There's love and admiration in there.
Is the book a misrepresentation?
So now we hear Sonny saying that, and telling the entire world that if he could see Steve Dunleavy right now, he wouldn't have a problem getting up in his face. Now, he doesn't mention any violence, but he makes it clear that he is angry about this, and that although he's controlling his anger here in front of the crowd, if he were to see Steve, he's saying words that he's not going to say anything like he's saying here. He will obviously be yelling these or screaming them. He will be very angry. It will be very apparent to Steve. Sonny is a dangerous individual, right? Sonny's basically showing us all exactly why Vernon terminated them over the phone, because he would have done the same thing to Vernon. Got in his face, gotten loud, let him know that he was angry. That scares people, okay? And especially when you're a person that carries a gun, and he'd be carrying a gun because that's what he did for the job. So here's a man with a gun and a temper and has been known to hit other people. He's never hit you, and you got a good feeling like he's not going to, but why put both of you in that position? Emotions run high in those positions when you're in that situation. So Vernon made the right call to do the calls, to terminate them by phone. And Sonny, on national television, has basically shown us that Vernon knew what he was doing.
Not at all. It's fact. It is true.
Well, where is the sensationalism then?
The drugs thing that he keeps trying to bring up as the main thing, and it's not. The drug things are mentioned in there minutely. If you read it, you'll see. But he went up there.
So in the comments here, we've got Emma saying that Sonny is not coming across as a very nice man, and that Angel is saying that he's too emotional to be doing this interview, in her opinion, and I would definitely agree with that. And Emma's also saying she can't warm up to Dave. Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And that Terry's saying they were laughing it up in the interview. Yeah, and it's very clear here why Elvis is the superstar. Sonny is completely unable to handle these interview questions. Like, he's not able to give them the snap. Like, if this was Elvis getting asked these questions, this would be smooth, right? Like, we've seen Elvis throughout his career field all kinds of crazy journalist questions, and usually he's got something funny to say. He's got him eaten out of the palm of his hand by the end of it. That's not what Sonny's doing. Now, Sonny, not only was he good looking in this interview, he has, he always had an incredible amount of personal charisma. He didn't have Elvis level charisma, but he had a lot. He was a very interesting guy. He could tell a great story. He talked a little too much, because if you watch Billy and Joe's EFM channel, they'll tell you that his nickname was the Great Explainer, or the Explainer, because he would just go on and on and on telling you about something that you didn't want to know about. And you can see that in some of the interviews that he does, and even here, where he tries to control the interview. And that's not going to happen with this number of press people around, unless you're really good at talking to the press, like Elvis was. Now, Dave is completely out of his element. He is not able to handle in any way this kind of interaction with the press. This is not his forte. And if you see Dave interviewed at any other time, he's never really good with it. He's always Dave. That's who he is. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but in a way, it's kind of like being Dr. Nick. Dr. Nick was not good with the press. He was always Dr. Nick. He always thought and talked very slowly. He thought deeply about things, and they used that against him. Dave isn't the clearest speaker in the world. I believe Dave has deep thoughts, and he thinks deeply about things. I think Sonny did too, and I think Red did. But they weren't the greatest communicators in the world. I think Sonny was a much better communicator, although he talked too much. So, and he couldn't handle, he wasn't able to see into the hearts of the journalists and provide what they needed in order to get the quote or to move on the way that Elvis could, or the way that the Colonel could. That's what the Colonel and Elvis brought to the table. And just to get back into the opinions here, or into the comments, Emma's just saying that she agrees, and Regina's saying 100%. Terry saying that's true. Elvis would be better in this interview. Yeah, he would have been a lot better. So, there's a reason that Sonny wasn't making the top bucks. He didn't have the talent, even though he was loyal for 16 years and he was good at what he did. And we'll see in a much later, well, I don't actually have that interview on deck, but Sonny does go on to work for a bunch of big rock bands where he sets up security and stuff for them. So he's seen as a leader in the security industry for the field. So Sonny is, all the people that Elvis had around him, they were all exceptional people in their way. I mean, Dave was a #1 karate guy. He was right at the top. Red could write songs. He wrote several songs, and one of them was a huge hit. And he was also an actor, and he was a good actor. If you watch what he's in, he was good. And he really did make Elvis look good in the movies that he acted with him as a stuntman. But beyond that, he had his own acting career. So these guys had something spectacular about them. That's why Elvis had them in the inner circle. It's just that as they all grew older, something happened and they all broke apart. And I believe that they did something specific in the years 74, 75, 76. And Emma's saying that she loves the songs that Red wrote. Yeah, so people like to see people as two-dimensional. They're the good people or the bad people. They were either for Elvis or they're against Elvis. They were either bloodsuckers from Elvis or they could get along on their own. Well, these three guys were all of those, right? Like, they're all this wrapped into one. And it's just not that simple. And it's just like our own lives. We've all got people and relationships like this. And this helps us learn from watching Elvis and how he handled these situations. Because none of ours could be nearly as complicated as Elvis's, I don't think. Because Elvis had so many people orbiting him. And I've got some ideas about how to show that in a graphic nature that I'm hoping to bring out in some future videos, because I think it's really important to understand the circles that were around, because we often talk about the inner circle, but there was also a second circle and a third circle and a fourth circle and a fifth circle. And you really need to know where these people were. And they didn't stay within one circle. Like here, somebody's gone from the #1 circle, the inner circle, and he's pushed them all the way out past 5 or 6 or however many circles he had. They're all the way back out into the regular public, basically. And not even fans. They're beyond the fans and possibly even into the enemies category. So I think there's so many people that he knew. And then there are so many stories that come about who his friends are, because he had such an impact on you for just a few moments, if you just saw him for a few moments. But let's get into some more of this interview.
And could watch this man being embalmed, that was alive and well that day or something before, and I couldn't do that. But he was fat. It wasn't a thing of where he was an old type of killing and things with their hands. He was into all of these things. It wasn't just with death. He was curious about everything in life. He really was.
Yeah, it wasn't. Are you going morbid?
Why are you here? We have been told by someone that his father doesn't want us there.
And do you think
So now we're hearing that the things in the book, the things that they're putting into the papers that are making Elvis look so bad, Sonny and Dave were both saying those are sensationalized. That these things are true, but they're not nearly as bad as Steve Dunleavy's making them out to be. But still, you should read the book, because they've also said you should read the book, right? So we're getting a lot of conflicting messages, is what I think.
believe he's a phony now after all this?
I think that what I saw today was phony from the guy that I met a year ago. Yes, I do.
think it's fun.
Dave, you seem to be implying before that you were writing the book in part to try and get Elvis to change his ways. Is that right?
You bet. That was one of the reasons. There were a number of reasons for writing the book. Number one, we felt that the manner in which we were discharged wasn't right. I mean, any employer has the inalienable right to fire any employee. No question about that at all. But nobody has a right to treat you like a piece of garbage. You know, nobody. And number two...
So Dave says that he was treated like a piece of garbage because Vernon called and gave him 3 weeks of pay and said, don't come back. Now, does anybody believe that Dave was treated like a piece of garbage? Or do you believe that Dave was treated like an employee? Like any employee, that even if maybe he did deserve a few more weeks, but he'd only been there a few years. I mean, so even under some of my most generous termination packages, severance packages, when I would do that, for somebody that had been there around the number of years Dave had, 3 or 4 weeks would have been pretty standard. I mean, 4 weeks is a month. But that's today. You know, this is a long time ago, so I'd love to see what you guys think. And let's hear what else Dave has to say.
To continue with that is, again, you know, to reiterate what we said earlier a couple of times, we wanted to point out to him, you know, what he was doing, not only to himself, but to the people around him. And we didn't want him to be what he was. We wanted him to be what we knew he could be and had been, you know, again. And third...
So Dave's saying some weird stuff here. They didn't like Elvis the way he was. They wanted him to be somebody else. He's indicating maybe it was somebody from before, you know, but they don't like Elvis as he is. That's kind of a rotten thing to say. I don't know exactly what he's referring to either. He's not very clear here. But it's also the second reason. So the first reason was I got fired and I didn't like the way I got fired. I felt like I was treated like garbage. So that's a revenge motive, as has already been stated in the comments. You know, he wants to get back at somebody because he doesn't like the way he was treated. And that was the number one reason. And he just told us that. You know, it's very important. You notice he didn't have any notes. So he pulled this up out of his memory. And the number one thing his memory told him is, hey, man, you got treated like garbage. So we had to get back at him. Number two is, we don't like who Elvis was anymore. You know, sure, we're his friend and he's changed and we don't like the way he's changed and we're not willing to stick with that. But we were willing to stick with it as long as we got paid. Something like that. I don't, you know, maybe that's not what he was really saying. It's kind of what I'm hearing. He's got a third reason. But Emma's saying that she believes he was treated well, more like a friend than an employee. You know, I think he was treated well. And I think that his own actions after he was terminated, where he went and waited for Elvis, I believe it was Palm Springs address or something like that, but he went and waited for him somewhere to confront him. That proved that Vernon did the right thing by terminating him by phone. And that whatever mindset Dave was in wasn't an appropriate one to be having a conversation with Elvis at that time. Certainly not a confrontation. Let's see the third reason.
Really, we wanted to, my God, we had families, you know, and we're sitting out in the streets, and what are we going to do? Be 40-year-old stuntmen? Or
I wanted to add one.
So his third reason is he's not getting paid anymore. Okay, now he puts it out as his family and that he's sitting out on the streets, but that's not true. As they've just said, they got 3 weeks of pay. They just told us that. So he got almost a month of pay. Now, sure, what are you going to do after that 3 weeks? I get you. I get it that that's a difficult time period. It's a difficult time period for anybody when they get terminated. But he's not special in that way. It's true of everybody who got terminated. And believe me, there was unemployment in 1977, plenty of it. Plenty of people getting terminated all the time. So Dave has taken this very personally. And Dave's history at this point is, I don't believe he's had a lot of jobs. He's done a lot of self-employment things like teaching karate, and he's worked for other people that had karate studios and things like that. But he's not ever worked in like a corporate environment, I don't think. If he has, it's been like entry-level position kind of stuff. His expertise was really in the karate and being able to teach people karate, and that's really how he made his money. And Elvis found him there through Ed Parker and then elevated him into this position, and he probably was getting more money more steadily. It's really the steadiness of the money through Elvis, and it gets very easy to become dependent on that, and I'm sure he was terrified. He was scared to death. How am I going to make this money? Who am I really? Do I even have any talents that are worth being paid for? These are all self-doubts that people have when they get terminated. And like he said, 40 years old. So now he's not the young man that he used to be. He started for Elvis probably, when he was 35, 36. So now he's at this kind of, we all have like a little bit of a midlife crisis around 40. And, this has affected him. Sonny's in the same position. Red's in the same position. But the truth is, they're not any worse off than anybody else in society. Now, should they be mad about that because they were friends with this great superstar who was going to care for them? Well, maybe, maybe. And their emotions are certainly valid, but I believe the actions they have taken based on those emotions, which would be my advice to you, is when you feel very emotional, that is the very worst time to ever make a decision, whether you're extremely happy, whether you're extremely sad, whether you're angry, whether you're in a rage, whether you are ecstatic about something. Those are terrible moments to make decisions. They're almost always bad. I believe these three lived in a state of anger for a very lengthy period, probably starting from before they were terminated, and they put plans into motion. And now, like they said, they were done a year ago, and now they're stuck with them. And Regina's saying that if they didn't like Elvis, they could have left, but they didn't. And that's absolutely right. They could have, but the fears that Dave has expressed with number 3, that's exactly why they didn't leave. They all felt that way. And when you look at the fans, even now, that look at them and say, well, they were talentless hacks and they were getting all their money from Elvis, I'm sure they kind of felt that way inside, right? It's not, we kind of see that because they projected some of that. Now, like I said, they were all extraordinary people and they could all earn their own living, but they didn't feel that way at the time. And Terry saying that they were hanging on then, right? And Emma saying that she agrees. I don't think Dave was used to having someone as a boss. Or, when you've mixed friendship with business, and that almost never ends well, but that was Elvis's life. That's the way he lived it. And that's really where we've got to end it for today. We've got to the full hour. We did not get through this clip. We're going to have more of it. And then I've got a very lengthy follow-up article that we've done about half of, but it's got those details that I know you guys all want to know. And then I've got a couple of follow-up articles that have to do with Sonny, things that Joyce, our fan, wouldn't see, but that kind of bring us into a full circle to understand, where this all went to. And my free link for today was going to be one of these Sonny articles. In fact, let me go ahead and give that out. That way you guys that like to do the reading can go ahead and read ahead. And then, because there's only a few quotes out of this particular interview that I'm really interested in for our purposes, but it was a 2007 article with Sonny, and I think you guys will enjoy reading it. There it is. I've put the link in the chat, and I'll talk more about that when we again come together. Angel's asking, do I go live at a certain time every day? I am trying to hit 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day right now. And say, Hey, thank you everybody for coming. Having some tech issues at the very